Hello, Sinead Murphy is the second
Hello.
meeting.
It is.
What was it last time? Last, like over a year ago now, when we
Gosh,
first
it
met.
yeah, it could be. I know I was in Playa de Carmen, so that's yeah, could be a year ago. That's crazy.
Yeah, it's been a long time, but it's been again another person we met on LinkedIn and was one of the comments under one of my posts, I think, and then Laura was around then at
Yeah, that would make sense.
LinkedIn, and there was what was it? The first interaction was like you said something about how how our thoughts can trick us into thinking what some things and the others, and we bullshit ourselves, and there's like yeah, black belt ninja, whatever, and there was this kind of camaraderie going on since then,
Yeah, the
and
rest
you
is history.
and you come and go and so we decided to meet and catch up, and maybe some people can find some valuable information and about how the journey was. So you're in London, and what's the plan? Do you intend to stay?
I didn't really know, is the honest answer when I first arrived back. But the answer is yes. I don't know. Permanent is not really a word I use these days, given how much things change quite rapidly. But I plan to stay in London for a good while now. Um, it's quite nice to feel and have a bit of stability. Traveling obviously has its pros, and a lot of people don't really speak about the cons, and one of them is the lack of stability. So that's been a nice surprise is to because obviously it's my home, London, born and raised here.
Mhm. Mhm.
And yeah, there's been a real sense of stability since coming back and catching up with people. So yeah, it's actually gone well. I sound surprised because I am surprised, but
Right, because you said you were kind of leaving London in a bad frame of mind. It's a bad There was
yeah,
a bad kind of difficult times, and now you're expecting it to be worse, but actually it's not. So it's nice
yeah,
to.
absolutely. Yeah, I mean, I haven't lived in London. It I think it could be about 4.5 years. I mean, it was before BC, before COVID. Um,
Before BC,
yeah,
yeah.
when
Before
everything changed.
AD, you wanna say before AD or CE?
So yes, I mean, I had been traveling on and off like from about 2018, so I hadn't really spent that much time in London, and each time I came back, it got harder to be here. And then I moved to Bristol, and then I just happened coincidentally to be going to Thailand as the COVID hit, and then I just didn't come back to the UK. So yeah, that idea of my kind of memory and experience of not really wanting to be in London was still very um vivid, I guess. And yeah, it's been a pleasant surprise coming back. As we were mentioning before, it's like I don't know if it's just me that's changed, or if London's changed, or it's a bit of both. My guess, because I can't really know, my guess is it's a bit of both. I think this whole experience obviously has shifted a lot of people in a lot of places, myself included. And yeah, it's been an experience coming back.
Definitely. And when you say like, yeah, I feel similar. The places I go to, people seem to be more, as I said before, like people seem more receptive to like explore mysteries and like kind of more psychology and like people are curious, like what the fuck has actually happened? Like there's so
Yeah.
much strange stuff happened, but it was very surprising and it's overwhelming and it's hard to make sense of. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. And I guess although there is clearly still stuff going on, in terms of that, the dust has settled a little bit. So it has, I would imagine for a lot of people, opened up a bit of a window of reflection, as you say, of like, what the fuck just happened? And
Yeah.
more importantly, what do I want to do, you know,
What's
my
worth
life, or why am I here? And those questions I would imagine start coming up for people because it was a such an experience that shifted everyone.
and as you said, has been, because if we follow the logic that we kind of implicitly agreed to the protocol of having crisis and then a bit of peace and then another crisis and then a bit of
Mm,
peace. And so we're in this kind of quiet bit, but we expect crises to happen, even not for conspiratorial reasons, but for technical reasons of where the world has driven itself, right? So
Yeah,
we are in a yeah, we're running faster and faster, and there's more and more obstacles appearing in the field of vision. Um,
absolutely. Yeah.
and yeah, so and even stability itself, you see, like we almost have to redefine what before pre-COVID understanding of main concepts definitions was like what was stability then, what is stability now, what is stability like. If you can't, we will have less and less, I mean we'll have to more and more act on insufficient evidence without long-term assessment of anything,
Yeah.
right? So what does it mean to be stable? In your case, you came back and this you have your roots and your friends and family, so that's the kind of sense of rootedness and stability which I felt as well. I've been feeling here sometimes because I live in Malta, my family are in Poland, but I used to live prior to COVID for 15 years in the UK as well. So I felt really lost in this transition between even like choosing, yeah, I can go anywhere, so where, you know? And
Yeah.
there's a real sense of homelessness and displacement, really the anxiety of where do I belong, what's my purpose, and all of that. Yeah, this
Yeah.
disorientation. But
Yeah.
in
It's
a way,
very
it's kind of
interesting you say
necessary.
that, because that was exactly um the question in my mind just before I came, not long before I decided to come back to London, is like, where am I going? It was this kind of restlessness feeling about being in Mexico, even though there was nothing wrong. But and there was just this constant question of like, where am I going next? Where am I going? And that was just, it's like this where am I going next? I just don't feel like it's working for me anymore. Where is actually some place that I can at least feel like home, even on a temporary basis, if that makes sense, where it's not this continuous, where am I going? Where am I going to be next? Oh, what do I do next? And because that can sound quite cool and exciting, and it can be, but for me anyway, 4 years down the line, it kind of lost its excitement at the very least. Like, I
Novelty,
just want
yes.
to unpack my bag. I just want to stay somewhere and not move for a long time. And
Yeah,
my
def
hometown made sense.
definitely. And it's this, but look, but then what happened is that let's say we find ourselves, people like us find ourselves scattered across, you know, the earth, and then um we end up talking online because we resonate with
Yeah.
something that we saw, and then it's like, oh fuck, like because I kind of seek out, because it's just in us to find a comrade, to find a, you know, um
Really.
someone to relate to, and we end up kind of there's this new kind of cyber realm of strange intimacy which is almost immediate because it comes from the context when we have self-excluded from like the old context that is always territory bound and the structure bound, systems bound, and all of that stuff. It's kind of
Yeah.
we left it, we found ourselves alone and kind of going through, you know, the difficulties as well that
On my
entails,
own.
right, flying around. But then yeah, but then we've always been rooted since since caveman times, we've always been rooted to the land, to our community. So it's now, look, it's very strange, like all of these people, like, building online communities, everywhere online community, right? It's like a
Mm,
must. But now we are kind of doing it for the first time a world scale, which
yeah.
is where we can transcend these local boundaries and actually we are forced. I mean, once you are in this space, when you have abandoned your like tribal identity, let's say to some extent, right? And you observe the world and you are called to comment on it and maybe, you know, like share what you found out, what you committed your time to, you know, learning about. And that kind of leads us to a demand for some sort of like defining human values, what that would be, like what would human values be even if, because when I saw your post, it's always been like what really like picked me up and was that your understanding of what it means to be human is pretty much aligned with mine. And even though there is no definition as such, like we can't
Mm,
really rely, it's something that is like, I guess it's mostly intuitive, and what is unique to us that no other species can have, right? And what is not even as a species, biologically looking species, but a species of consciousness rather, right? So
Yes.
you can be a human looking person and lack certain qualities which you have the capacity to develop, but there's shitloads of difficulty you have to go through to actually to burn the old wood of all the crap that you thought you were, but that was just given to you by the context out of which you have grown.
Yeah, definitely. And that's like on an individual level, a collective level. Um, and then, gosh, like, and then you talking about even on the unconscious collective level as well. So it's there's many layers, or ancestral or intergenerational, all this stuff is
Mhm.
whooshing around. And then for me, what is another part, just while you were talking, the word that popped into my mind is what's emerging. So which is very difficult for us to even find words to. And I find that a lot, actually, even though I like writing posts. Um, there are sometimes there just aren't words yet
Mm.
for what I can feel like is happening, what I can feel like is wanting to at least come through. And a lot of this chaos and pressure, as well, as awful as it is, somehow seems to be part of that. Well, it clearly is part of that wider picture of our, I mean, the word is probably evolving consciously, but it just, the word emerging kind of makes more sense at this point. It's like, I think we're a little bit off the whole true evolving. We've
Right.
got a little while to go, but like,
We
we're
missed,
obviously going there.
took a wrong road
Yeah.
at some
Like,
point.
oh,
The
turn
car
around.
got confused.
Not
The
that way.
captain fell asleep. Well,
Yeah,
okay, so
this,
what do you mean by that? That's something, so it can get us somewhere. What do you mean by, like, you mean as humanity,
yeah.
we have lost plot at some point, and where would you kind of locate the fork, or um, like a
Where would I?
start point, conversion point, or diversion point?
So I know I'll speak from personal experience, I guess. I know for the majority of time growing up, there was always this, and I'm sure many others can relate to it as well. There was always this sense that something important, very important, is missing. And but I didn't know what it was. I could just feel that this thing, and not necessarily physical, but something very, very important was missing. And the best way I was able to ever describe it was, like meaning, like what is the meaning of life, which is an important question, but it's quite a grand question, especially when you're quite young.
Mm.
And that was just something that continuously bugged me. So then I was trying to find it in different ways, or maybe trying to find it through different experiences, or maybe even people. And this thing, this idea or feeling and sense, I just couldn't find anywhere. And so there's two things. There is when the whole COVID shit show, shall we say, came about, that really forced me, well, it was still a choice, but that really forced me, because I was aware of a lot of corruption by that point anyway. Um, but it really forced me to kind of look a bit deeper. And that's where I kind of went into more of the, I guess you could say, the occult side of things, and more looking into, I guess, the darker side of things. And that was perhaps one of the missing pieces, is because as much as I'd looked into the corruption in many different fields, I, I still had my own ceiling of where I was willing to go, with accepting what is actually going on in the world, in terms of how dark it is. Though, I mean, the word, this can be quite a triggering word, I guess, for a lot of people. And it was a word that I never even used, which was the word evil. It was like that to me just had religious connotations, and I've never been religious. Um, And yet what I learned when I started digging into what was going on behind the COVID, um, whatever we kind of want to call it,
Spectacle.
experience,
Yeah, COVID
uh,
experience.
was, that was the only word I could come up with, was like, this is actually pure evil. Like, you can say psychopathy, but it's actually deeper than that, weirdly.
It's sterilizing it if you just call it, give it
Yeah,
a this.
because
Yeah.
not someone who is a psychopath would actually do the things that, this is just real malice against humanity. And
Right.
it's so deep and so unbelievable that understandably many people can't and won't and don't want to believe,
Man,
because it is unbelievable. So it's like, yeah, I get that.
it's mental.
So to swing that back round, that was an important piece. And anyone that's gone through that knows that in order to be able to really kind of face that darkness, and I guess, putting it out there, the demonic side of things,
One excited.
yeah, really shifted my whole perspective of the world. And then there was this kind of, interestingly, openness for what I would describe as the opposite, which would be, not to sound all new age, but the understanding of uh love, and that being like a frequency and energy. And that's what I guess I'm referring to, and what is emerging, because even the word love has its, people have even different interpretations of that, and I'm really talking about it being this very high frequency, um which is a completely different experience than any kind of love or caring that we've had before. But it required really looking into the darkness and seeing, what parts I have had to play in this world that's played out, how many things I've been ignoring. And, a lot of the anger and frustration at other people. And even now, my perspective on, uh, those that don't want to see, even that has changed a lot. I'm sure you've gone through a few different phases as well, but
Do
I've
you
gone
mean
through many different phases.
in terms of being more understanding, more
Yeah,
compassionate?
being more
Yeah.
understanding of, people's situation. It's just kind of been a dissipating. So it's not really a choice of like trying to understand it more. Um, it's just that kind of frustration, or that real anger has just kind of started to dissipate, because I know it's not helpful. Actually, the one thing that would be helpful, not that I'm trying to awaken anyone these days, because that, I just don't think that's helpful, of my time. But if there was anything that would actually support someone in the process of, perhaps making better choices in the future and not trusting people that are trying to kill you.
That would
um,
be helpful.
yeah, exactly. It's not that kind of judgment of people. It just doesn't work. You just get this block
Mm.
of, I'm right, they're right, and then we just go around in circles, and whatever was going to happen anyway. So yeah, so I guess that's my long-winded answer. I'm not sure if that makes sense. There's just been this, what I feel like is emerging, is this better understanding, um of, and it does sound fluffy, but of this understanding of what love is, in terms of it being a frequency. It's a different type of energy. It's a different type of vibration. And there's obviously having to be a bit of a shake in order for us to start literally vibrating at a different level, and things start to change on their own accord. Doesn't mean it's easy. And there's
Mm.
still quite a lot of things that have still shocked me, like learning as I go. But yeah, that's my answer.
Yeah, sure. And I think that's what attracted me to your post as well, first, because it you can really discern. Like, some people have the book knowledge of things, and they reason very well and they write very well, but they don't dare to go deep enough. I mean, deep enough. It's deep for them enough. But then,
Yeah,
like you said, your phrase, you gotta look into the abyss and not fall into it,
yeah,
which is really is referring to my, my favorite Nietzsche's thing. He says, like, if you look into the abyss will look back into you. So
yes,
that's the thing, isn't it? That is the danger. That is the um in order to evolve, you have to be able to not only witness the evil in the world, but your own capacity for evil and for cruelty and for deception and for, doing all sorts of shameful things, and not compartmentalizing those things, but actually say, no, this is part of my nature. This is what I'm capable of. And once you shed yourself, realizing that you are actually capable of these things that other people actually commit, because you can then see the evidence of them being committed and accept it. Yeah, why not? Well, if anyone can do it, I could also do it. And then you actually do the work. From there, you build your moral philosophy to not do it. Once you already know you are capable of doing it,
Yes.
that is where morality, the origin of morality, and some sort of like talking about what love and fear and everything is, right? Like when you actually come to terms with your fear, and it's really easy to see that, and it's I guess in me, as like my background in this kind of, it's through music. When I was a teenager, I liked metal bands and I played in bands and wrote these dark lyrics and translators. Like I was all kind of like engrossed in this stuff. And then at some point, maybe about 12 years ago, I had a big crisis, and I started actually exploring the nature of human destructiveness. Why do I do it? Because I had a band and I was doing it and I was going well and everything, and I was thinking like, why do I have to do it? I feel like shit. I feel like I'm deader after each gig. Like, what is it with it? Like, why do I have to do it? I shouldn't have to do it. It's petty. And then I started learning through like through anthropology and psychology and like Jung and all of that kind of unconscious stuff, and then the subsequent experiences in life, especially relational and romantic relationships, they have the great capacity to kick your ass. So that's
like a mirror.
Yeah, that's been exactly. So you see, so coming to terms with this stuff, what does it trigger with me? Like you said, with people, even very similarly for me, when COVID started, I was really like, boom, like, what the fuck can you see? Like, it's like you can't comprehend, like, how can you not see? And by now it's like you learn more and you become more humble and you become like, okay, it kind of conditions us also to, like you said, it's not a wise expenditure of our resources to fret around, to fret about it. It's more like, okay, embrace it, like give as much as you can give, and yet sometimes you have to just be like Frank, right? And you have and you have to just articulate things as it comes. And you don't know what the consequence will be, but I feel it is purifying to state things clearly, and it has value when most of people who maybe have access to that don't dare to go there. And it takes, or maybe they have too much to lose. And if one is in a position that, assessment that you can, there's not so much to lose, you can actually articulate things, and then it's present in the world, and people can find out for themselves how they feel when they read that.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. And it's interesting what what you just said, because it can sound like say nothing, right? Like, oh, there's no point trying to say, like, there's no point trying to wake anyone up or change anyone's mind, and that can somehow then be heard as if the complete opposite is like. And that's the other thing that we're learning as well, of this it's not this or that anymore in this kind of new world that's emerging. Is that, and that's what gets played the whole time, is the polarity is always gets played. And so yeah, it's totally not being remaining, because that's actually very detrimental to our own health, in terms of not just holding everything in, and you're basically then pretending to be someone that you're not. And it's like, you know what, I've come too fucking far to be sitting there like a mute, pretending that, not either pretending that I don't have an opinion or just not being okay. It's like, no, that's totally not what I mean. You will know where I stand on something, but it's just not my intention to try and convince you of it. And the irony is that can actually have more power, because that's
Right.
felt. It's like I've no interest in trying to convince you of anything. This just is what it is, or at least, at the very least, it is what it is for me. And then it's like, it's that, but I'm not going to sit here and like nod and agree with any kind of
No, that's it.
bullshit.
My life
Like
is to
that,
show
those
that.
days are done. Yeah.
Exactly. And it's telling how liberating that is.
Oh, very much so.
And
Yeah.
how much you clear the space. Because since that moment, you take what comes and you ignore the rest. And in my case at least, a good many better things started coming
Yeah,
quite
they do.
naturally. Because then you stop stifling what is best in you. You don't feel like you have to put an act in to any extent. You are being
Yeah.
polite, you're being respectful, and then but at the same time you take your you know you take your almost like an obligation to use your bloody mind, you to use your mind, not only because you can or you have right to it, but because that's the best strategy anyway. Because in a
Yeah.
world where most of people can't even think clearly, not because they're stupid, but because there's so much manipulation of information going on, that
Yes,
you
exactly.
really have to be a bit of a ninja to, you have to be committed to
You do.
understand things and to unpack things and yeah, like it's not merely an intellectual even, or it's not the diligence merely of it, but there's like an ethic that needs to be there to,
Yeah.
to commit to it, right? It's so everything becomes like a moral act in a way. Even acquiring knowledge is not just like a technical acquisition of knowledge, going to there, get a degree, and then you see like an expert can have top degree and be full of shit, and then what?
Yeah.
The whole civilization collapses. So like the reset has already happened for me. It's like the reset has happened when things that we used to believe in to be reliable indicators of what to do and how to live and whatnot have
Yeah.
finally broken down. And then there's a playing field of people, not even on territories or in locations of any kind, but online. So then it completely shifts, sorry, the entire economy of information
It does.
and disposition towards the world, because it's completely different context in every possible way. And like you said, we don't even have language yet for that realm because it's a
No,
new
we
realm.
don't. Yeah.
So we still operate in this physical reality, but then suddenly we're talking on Zoom with whoever we like, and everyone who might have felt very isolated for sometimes decades or years in the little communities, suddenly you break out of that bubble and you find like, so yeah, you're not abnormal. It's like you should
Mm.
never you didn't meet, and like throughout history, there were people like us trying to do the same job, and then subsequent regimes, and although the kind of, even when you talk about evil, I think it boils down to this strategy of polarizing populations,
Oh,
basically,
yes.
which has been the downfall of everything until now, including our present day. So but look, as I was just thinking today, as the things are accelerating, that like everything's accelerating, and it's like, let's say you have one crisis. In the medieval times, you could have crisis, and then okay, so then the whoever's in charge decides to engineer society in some kind of way, and then but it takes a long time before there's a next shift. And
Yeah.
then there's like there's like that first we are like agriculture, thousands of years, then you have like feudal times, like hundreds of years, and then you have industrial era is like 500 years, and now it's like digital era is like, whoa, that's like 10 years.
It's
Oh my
just like,
god,
no.
this is like, it's like shit. And it's like,
What's
so
it going to be today?
right, and look, and then let's call the kind of the puppet masters,
Mm.
the entities that pull the strings,
Yeah,
the masters of deception, as I call them, like the engineers of deception
absolutely.
to play humanity against one another by coming up with ideologies, mythologies, symbols, and kind of hypnotizing populations with these kind of tricks. And it's all, look, it has always worked for thousands of years. It wasn't so hard, but suddenly now they play by the playbook, but they're not that smart. And it's just each crisis is just another thing. And as the world becomes this kind of lab, because there is no science in the old way, because science has sold itself. So now the whole world is a lab. The whole world is a scientific lab, and we are playing part in it, as being subjected to it also. But we also create it, and then we're observing as the playbook is reiterated once again and once again. And there's a COVID, and there's Ukraine, and there's this, and there's and you see, and with each iteration, more people kind of are like, I can
really
even
this again.
Yeah. And the more people kind of wake up and like, even, you know, there's some people in my circle that like the previous time I saw them, they were still kind of very strong about something that was in line with one of the narratives promoted on the kind of political level, let's say. But now they are already, or at least partially, in the post-political, which is what we're talking about. Is the politics is just the distraction to, you know, to manipulate consciousness, and it's fascinating, isn't it? Because we can just observe it and exchange notes on it, and it is in a way.
I picked it. Did you pick up on this?
Did you see that?
Yeah, exactly. And that's the thing. And that's while the events themselves, I mean, they don't mess around. They don't play small when it comes to the events, but it is the same playbook, and that's what you start to see. It's like, okay, they're actually this is just rinse and repeat in terms of what they do and how they do it. They're getting bigger in terms of scale, although COVID was a pretty big one, but they're still pretty big in terms of scale, but it is the same playbook. And that in itself is very telling that, well, that means, although it may seem like they are creative, it's not creative. They've got a few different types of playbooks, which are all based on the same thing, basically. They're all based on fear, ultimately. And then they just play them. And like you say, they have worked, and they still work, but they're not working as well as they used to. And that's not even working as well as they did in, 2020, which was a good one. I mean, I was quite shocked by how that worked. I was like, really? Is everyone really going along with this? No, surely not. And it's like, that must be quite a worry for them. And if they worry about these things, but I imagine they do. They worry about losing power. So
because they are, and the power is slipping. And
it is.
I know for the fact there is dissidence within those ranks too, because the more humane of people who happen to be born into, more privileged positions or relations, they also think about the kids. They also think about what is the ultimate sacrifice here? Which side should I actually be on? And they puncture that. I like to use this metaphor, puncturing the bullshit balloon, because it's like,
amazing, love it.
Because it's all like the illusion is always based on unanimity of the crowd. You see in the old time kind of information technologies or pre-digital, it was much more containable, right? Like you could have it in a kind of like Stalin's bureaucracy, like Hitler's bureaucracy and terror. You could threaten people and maintain it more, but with technologies being evolving faster than the decision making of any organic biological entity.
Always.
That we know. Then there is no control. Like you can own copyrights, you can own a company, you can own a government, you can own anything, but you don't own the dynamic of evolving digital technology or information networks, right?
And people being able to connect and, research and share and all of these, and using that technology as well. So you've got the two most powerful systems working together than people working together and actually sharing things. I mean, there's obviously a lot of shit that comes out of that too, but ultimately people are learning how to you know, check and verify things and connect dots and question things, and which is, you know, ultimately requires one of the key things of being human, which is curiosity. Like you have to want to do that in the first place, which comes from being curious. And then you realize actually it's quite interesting, it's quite exciting being like your own little researcher. And that you learn a lot, you're connecting things, and then you start connecting with other people as well. So there's a huge amount of drive now, I think, for not, I mean, there's still a huge area of like what are the problems? What are the problems? But like we were just saying before, there's more of us now going, it's going to be the same playbook. Like, yes, they're going to be different names and different locations, but the playbook's always going to be the same. We know that. Now it's a time for us to start looking at what is it that we can actually do? What are the actual solutions here? Because they're not as powerful as they seem to be. Yes, the systems are in place, but they are not that powerful. It's an illusion on a mental, emotional, physical, and spiritual, which is why there has had to be so much manipulation and so much poisoning and so much fear to keep us, humanity, in a, you know, a dumbed down state. But I mean, there's a huge amount that's gone into that.
Yeah.
I mean, there's so much everywhere in terms of our, you know, affecting our brains and our body, and disconnection from our intuition and gut instinct and all of these things. And yet this is still happening. So I wouldn't want to be in their shoes anyway.
Yes, because how I see this, just the logic of anger and rage. I mean, anger could be productive if you direct it properly.
Yes.
But I mean, malignant behavior, you know, of any kind.
Mm.
As again, as I've realized it in myself, or as I recognized it in myself, which gave me this kind of, you know, aha moment, it always springs from weakness, from some sort of impotence, from some sort of like you're being, you feel vulnerable, and therefore you react in a, let's say you wake up and you had a shit night's sleep and you can't put your thoughts together and you get angry. It's like because you
Yeah.
lose control, you lose your sovereignty, and therefore you
And
seek
it's
to
everyone
inflict.
else's fault as well. That's the interesting
Yeah,
thing.
and
If you
it's
think
so
about that,
easy.
even down to that minute micro level, like, yeah, you've had a really bad sleep or whatever, and then you banged your toe as you were leaving you on the bed, and like everyone's going to get it now, because now everyone
That's
else
right.
is the problem. And if you put that, and it's like, well, that's kind of what they're doing, actually. It's like,
Right. Yeah.
right,
Like
it's
you're
a
throwing a
weakness. You're
tantrum.
behaving like a child. You're having a
Yeah, like a
tantrum, and
child.
everyone
Yeah.
else is the problem. And they're like, well, let's just get rid of everyone. Like, it's an
That's
extreme
right.
version, but you know those bad days that we had. It's like, well, everyone just fuck off. And it's like, actually, yeah. I mean, I wouldn't want to wipe out the whole world because of it, but on a micro level, I've definitely had those days where it's everyone else that is the problem, not me, because I've had a shit sleep, or you know, I didn't do whatever. So yeah, it's exactly that, just on a smaller level, which is funny.
And
I'm
you can,
just
you
gonna
know,
move and plug us in somewhere over there because
sure.
I'm about to run out of battery.
Mm-hmm. Right. So, so it seems like I was just saying to my students today, it seems like what we're experiencing is like a 2-year-old throwing a tantrum. Because in order to
That.
be that emotionally illiterate, to be truly psychopathic, truly malignantly narcissistic, you are basically a 2-year-old. Your emotional development is arrested, and yet your intellectual capacities, let's say your cognitive capacities alone, are super great, because then you can do all the mind games, all the
Yes,
super strategies, and you
without
know,
any sense of uh guilt or conscience.
conscience.
Yeah.
Right. which then gives you an asymmetrical advantage over any one being that actually has it to a great extent. So therefore, being truly, I mean, if we define humanity as having this capacity for compassion, but also obviously, if you want, you can get it you can, that can become a weapon, obviously, of
Yeah.
of the psychopathic type. And then you become a tool, but that doesn't mean you should be it seems like you should become a psychopath yourself, but that doesn't work either, because then you just end up killing each other. So the real deal is like develop these capacities, but be aware of your potential for psychopathy all the same.
Yeah.
And so when you encounter one, I think this is maybe very controversial, but
I like it. Go for it.
It was a real game changer for me. Yeah, I encountered it. My training was amazing. I come across some individuals who really like tested me and betrayed in a very sophisticated way, and it really taught me a lot. So it was when I realized that, oh, I actually learned from someone, from Richard Grannon. He said, like, I give you my absolution. If you encounter, you know, a malignantly narcissistic individual, and you happen to be too deep in the trap to actually escape, extract yourself, because that's how it kind of works. That's how the whole world system is now screwed up, because everything depends on their control. You can't remove the control of the deception, because that is like life support depends on it, on deception. So he said you have to be as nasty, as cruel, as deceitful towards them as they are towards you, or you will be eaten for breakfast. And that is hugely damaging. Wow. So because you have to break, in a way, you break your values, you break everything you believe in, and you accuse yourself of being a hypocrite. And then they can say that also, and they can weaponize that and gossip that say that you are a hypocrite, because technically you are.
Yes.
Right? Because they bet like you are psychopath's breakfast, as long as because they will always bet on your humanity, and as long as you are being humane with them, then you will always lose. So you must have the capacity to be inhuman with the inhuman, but it's, for me, it was temporary, and it cost me like a mental breakdown afterwards, after I've left the situation. But
yeah, but it's anti your nature, so it takes everything.
Anti your nature, but I think yeah, for limited, I mean, that is a lesser evil than giving in without a fight, I suppose. And it also, it forces you to come to terms with it. Yeah, it makes you cold-blooded too. I mean, and we will need it. There will be situations when you will have to deceive, even though you may be, you know, your mission is to be as truthful and authentic as possible. But the very nature of these things is that there is no one or the other. They all dance in the dynamic relationship, right?
Yeah.
And when someone's chief weapon is deception, then you cannot afford to be truthful, simply. So that's how power works. And yeah, it's just puzzling me, because it is corrupting, and it's very, very unhealthy for anyone who strives to be virtuous, and yet
I think this goes
it
back
seems to be necessary.
Sorry, I think this goes back to what's emerging is because that's kind of like a bit of a what's the word, a double bind, like
double bind.
And so therefore, you know, you're dead, and if you do play that game, then your humanity's dead, right? Or it takes a long time to, you kind of have to kill it, and then hopefully you can get it back, and maybe you don't. So it is a bit of a double bind. Obviously, they're not doing anything, you're just going to get caught in the trap, or maybe worse. Especially for a lot of people, they're now really suffering, right, in terms of just not complying at the very least, which is not even that bad, you know, when you're actually in a direct trap where it is you one-on-one with someone. That's a whole different ball game, but that is effectively what's going on as well, just on a bigger scale. So I think this comes back to what I kind of sense is that there's something emerging. There has to be, because either one of those, and that's the current situation, because we do have this it's the current world we're in, like it's generally this or that sort of thing, like the polarity or duality, or but something else is now emerging, because that's not going to be the answer either. Like it can be an answer, or it's the current one, but that's just not going to work. That's just not going to work either, because
not
we're always going to be in that dynamic. And it's like, well, then, well, how do we actually get free? Because the point is not to comply or succumb to this control and tyranny and just psycho behavior, and also not become it,
Right.
even if it is brief. So like I don't have any answers apart. Well, this may seem a bit random, but it's actually, I guess it's kind of connected to the stuff I've been learning recently, which may not make sense at this point of how this could be the solution. But what I am learning, and maybe you're aware of this already, but it's like everything is contract. And that sounds really simple, but it's actually very, very deep. So even these psychos and demons or demonic entities, they're still abiding by, believe it or not, certain rules, even though it's kind of fraudulent. So I'm not sure if I'm making sense, but there is a gameplay that's going on where it's still contract. So now that doesn't mean you can't enter a contract somewhat unconsciously or manipulated into it, but it is still a contract. And that's on a physical level as well. Like here in this playing field, the whole system itself is a contract, even though we don't see it that way. Every relationship, there is a contract. Like if Sinead, would you like to come on and have a talk? That's an offer, and me saying yes. That's you could say it's agreement, but basically in some term it's a contract. We tend to look at contracts as the formal thing, which is correct too, but everything is a contract. And that's when you start seeing the other pattern that's going on, or playbook, in that they have to inform us of everything that they're doing. And this is like on the grand scale thing, right? How this works on a one-to-one, I wouldn't know, but on the grand scale, it's definitely playing out. Like there was this idea of like, oh, they have to tell us because of karmic effect or whatever, but it's actually to do with contract. Perhaps as well. I'm not saying the karmic thing isn't true, but something didn't sit right with me about just that. There's actually a contract involved because there's an offer, and then we actually accept. And this comes down to everything.
Yes, and I think this is so different from the, let's say, previous regimes, that this will be, I agree with you, on the basis of compliance. So what will be different is the quality of sacrifice demanded for your liberty, and that will be ratcheting up, which will be the fuel for further development of those who choose to go that way. And yet I'm a believer in taking both pills. The Matrix metaphor is you take that, and then the philosopher on whose story the film was based is like, this is all wrong, because what you've done is like you've completely destroyed my idea. My idea was that the very problem with the the hyperreal, as he called it, is that you can't distinguish the real from unreal. That is the problem. And that's what Hannah Arendt said is the problem in authoritarian regimes, is like the true from untrue cannot be distinguished anymore, and then you can do anything.
Yes.
Right? So as long as people are hyper certain about something being true and something being false, they are being just manipulated. So, and similarly, if you can hold a significant degree of uncertainty and yet be convinced about your decisions enough to make the choices that you don't regret, then that means you're on the right track. But that means you have good resistance to, let's say, anxiety resulting from accepting uncertainty, paradox, confusion, and all of that stuff, right? So, and that kind of possibly drives you to supra-rational guidance or believing in stuff that's not purely evidence-based or empirically based, other than the results of those actions actually align with your intentions of those decisions.
Yeah.
And that is your lab. And that is the lab is your first of all the laboratory of your nervous system in the first place. And the second order is how your decisions, do they actually line up into a progression of events that you would want to be there. So you've not miscalculated your I went off on a tangent, but yeah,
Tangents are
but
good.
it is a bit like that, isn't it? It's like back to language, like what does it mean to be rational? What does it mean to be scientific? What does it mean to, again, we have entered an era of post secular time, effectively. Because also, this very importantly, in terms of technology, you see, like we had printing press, which made like a standardized writing, standardized grammar, standardized, let's say, the way you do science, and you have journals and you have universities and institutions, and then you can check if someone discovered something. You go to the library and you check it. Okay, yes, it's checked. And suddenly, once the paper print kind of goes out of fashion as it is now, and everything goes online and you can edit it at any time, you've dissolved the possibility of epistemology, of knowing what is true and what isn't true. And added to that, you have, then speeding neuroscience, nanotechnology, all of the, microprocessing, AI, and all of that going crazy. And that is being weaponized to twist information and twist human perception. So the same tools that have worked over centuries to, let's say, mislead or make people, engineer decisions and so on, and now it's a completely different order of magnitude now of those things. So we have to be like really ninja now.
Yeah.
We really have to, like any one person. And it's not even that if we call this a war against consciousness, then the very idea of war itself, as even we read in official documents by NATO, which are available, again, referring to your point that it's contract, it has to be available. I mean, it will be very inconvenient to go and look for it, because it'll be all the sugar-coated bullshit thrown in your face to get angry about or get passionate about or whatever. But it's out there, and if you care about, if you have a consistent, coherent framework of what has worked, what your your way of validating knowledge has worked so far to some extent, and you apply that, then you do have a perspective. It's not going to be a super objective perspective. It'll be your perspective, but you can always, if you also practice your communication skills and language and relational capacity with varied, like range of individuals, then we can have this conversation, and I can listen to your perspective and you mine and so on, and we can
absolutely,
ideally, like you said about, let's say, this urge to wake people up. The more we kind of not care about it anymore, we can get perspectives that people will actually open up and give us their perspectives that can be super valuable, because we all are aware of our blind spots.
Exactly, because how I was viewing the world, and especially in the panic of trying to wake people up, it was very difficult to well, actually, I think like it would have been impossible for me to try and put myself in someone else's shoes, because I just couldn't understand it. It was like, what are you doing? And don't do that. And now, especially coming home as well, and having seen people that I haven't seen since before I left, um, wondering how those conversations are going to go. I'm like, I don't even know what we're going to talk about, because so much has changed in these few years. And it just wasn't about that. It was just about catching up and, like you say, hearing their perspectives on, what's happened and how things have gone over the last few years. And it was just really refreshing. And but it definitely took me not going into the situation of, or like, what am I going to say? It was just let it go and see where it flows, which is just hearing people, seeing what they've got to say. If I disagree, I disagree, or if I agree, I agree. It's just like, it's not the be all and end all, and yet these areas are still important to me. So whoever is with me is going to know that, these are the things that are important to me. This is my perspective of the world. Like, to say I don't care, I'm not sure I'm not really sure what the word is, right? Because it's not like, oh, I don't give a shit what, whether people, but it's just,
Yeah,
do you know what I mean? It's just not, whether you believe me or not is not going to change
it's
anything
not
for me.
relevant. Yeah, like you said, it's not really it's not helpful. And because
No, it's not helpful.
we've experienced a lot of waste of time and energy, and there seems to be a general sense in people to try to be kind and like you know uh, like harness like the best stuff from meeting people and um, being together, not try to hang on the negative stuff. Because ultimately everyone had to come to terms with a lot of stuff they never expected to, and also because first time in history it's become unavoidable to such a great extent. So even as weirdos, we don't appear that weird because
No, exactly.
technically people are like, all right, that was true, yeah,
Yeah,
okay, all right. But then also when you don't boast, and it's not even about that, because that you boasting is that's again your little shitty kid in you,
yeah,
right? So it's that kind of mutual humbling kind of process, perhaps, um,
yeah.
and the growing acknowledgement that ultimately, yeah, we're in one boat, and
Yeah,
even
we are.
I think
Exactly.
the ultimate challenge is for me is this arriving at the perspective where it all becomes impersonal totally. So even though there are bad actors, and there are malignant and malevolent forces and conscious, mostly unconscious, but then what is unconscious? Simply continuing going to work one more day is you contributing sometimes to cruelties and atrocities. But I think for yourself, it's better if,
Yeah,
because this is like, there's this aspect of
because it can be all consuming, and that can
it's
actually,
all consuming. Yeah, it's like being an addict. You
yeah,
can say, people argue like, oh, but he's an addict or she's an addict, and they can't control it. It's not really their fault. No, they can. I mean, I've seen people ending it. So there is responsibility there. But at the same time, it's a kind of possessed. It's a kind of the kind of a vehicle of a greater entity that is not personal, that is not merely ideological, but it's kind of a binding force which like the Moloch, the Moloch archetype, let's call it, or
yeah,
egregore. And it's how Daniel described it is like it's had humanity for a very long time, and as technologies evolved and societies evolved, it started to gain greater and greater power.
yeah,
And and so humanity is this vehicle for this immaterial emergent kind of property, which is the result of selfish action on a massive scale.
Yes.
Selfish, and you might not realize the damage that you're causing by doing a little selfish thing, and yet when you have it, when you
Such
connect,
scale.
yeah, when you scale it up and it accumulates, it gains the force of its own, and it directs the physical kind of physical world.
Yeah.
And then you can
Yeah.
legitimately say that those at the very top are the most manipulated ones in a way, because the current, because in a way they are the pinnacle of the current, and we have little, I mean, we have the least, perhaps in some ways, the least power to resist, but in some other ways, the greatest power to resist, because we don't have that much agency either over it. So we have, our agency is much more local and specific,
Yes.
right? So on a metaphysical level, we, in a way, the only problem is that we are the multitude, and the multitude, it's really hard to get people to get on with each other on a massive scale, because we've always done it to up to like 150 people max. So our brains don't know how to do it. And then we have the problem of transhumanism, when they will say, whoa, we can do it now. Just put the shit in your head.
Just put this in. Whoa, be superhuman. It's like, no, we don't need that. But yeah, and especially the kind of, and then there's, like you say, the element of the selfishness, right? And it's not always that evident, right? Because no one really thinks, well, maybe people do secretly think that they're selfish, but I don't really think we understand how deep that is gone, because it's kind of hidden and buried in different ways. Like and I'll give you an example, which is my own awakening to a part of selfishness was, and this may piss some people off, but it was this idea of being Miss Independent. And it was absolutely to my own detriment. And in hindsight, looking back, it's actually quite it was very selfish driven. Now, that certainly wasn't obvious to me. It became obvious because of where I ended up. You know, the outcome was like, this is a bit shit. This is a bit lonely. And this whole idea that I need to do, or that I want to do, but I need to do everything on my own, and all of this stuff about being independent. Now, this is different than having who you are on an individual and being individuated. This is this concept of independence.
Societal idea.
Yeah. You know, like, you know, you can do it all on your own. It's like, maybe some people can, but no, like, that's what leads to this real disconnection with even friends and family and humanity. And even if you are in some sort of line of service, it can be very actually selfish driven. And that was just kind of a recent thing for me. It's like, it's kind of hidden in different areas that are marketed to us as this, not utopia as such, but, you know, this is what you actually want. And if you do have a touch of it, or you actually get there, you're kind of a bit like, well, this is a bit shit.
Yeah.
Because you're on your own. And you're like, that's actually completely not what we're designed. We're designed as social creatures or social beings. And but yeah, it's deeper than that. So we all have that element, and it's not to swing the other way as well, right? Of like just being a complete walkover, and you know, and everyone comes before
super traditionalist and super conservative.
Exactly. So that's, but there is this real selfishness is definitely something that is kind of way more on my radar now, because of my own experience. Not like, oh, everyone out there is really selfish, but me. Like, oh, it's like, no, this is a lesson that I've recently learned. And I guess was part of, kind of without realizing, was part of the reason of coming home as well. Indirectly, I would say. And reconnecting with people, because I guess there was maybe a bit of a stubbornness there as well, in terms of no one listened to me and blah 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 blah. And so
Yeah, yeah,
a
and
lot of that started to melt away, but there was still
transcending
this
that is a
independence.
lesson. Mm-hmm.
Like if I'm coming back to the UK, but I thought you were someone who's going to live in Mexico and go traveling. I don't know. It really kind of shone a light on this idea of who I'm supposed to be, like this Miss Independent person. And actually underneath that there was a selfishness about it. And it's like this, that's just bullshit. You end up isolating yourself.
Yes, and you see, I've been thinking because I'm also, I've been thinking about that, living similarly like you, alone for abroad and having some connections, but ultimately we've always been lived in communities, in families, and that is the basis of any society, really.
Yeah.
So it's like Nora Bateson, she made me really think about the importance of family. So for me, it was like, because I was born in a Roman Catholic family in Poland. So obviously the family has always been like that. I always thought about like all the hypocrisy and all
Yeah.
the stuff that I didn't like, like as a kid, what annoyed me, and I couldn't be rock and roll and whatever.
Yeah.
I had to go to church and stuff. Like, so obviously it's super annoying. But then as you grow up and you think like, yeah, so I will be a rebel and I will be like independent. And then you think, yes, so I'm independent. I mean, not to say I'm content with the way the choices I made, but then at the same time, there's this, like you say, there seems to be this almost like a marketing scam, like this ideological trick that people are so proud to be independent and individualistic and whatnot that they don't form families. So then they are much weaker enemy to destroy and to subjugate, because then obviously we know the plans that we will be the spanner in the gears of is to destroy the family unit. And
Yeah.
like all regimes always try to, well, kind of what is envisaged is a mutation of all previous regimes. So we can't really even use the terms like 20th century totalitarianism type, But and ultimately is, yes, to destroy femininity, and to destroy family unit, and to destroy procreation, really, and
Absolutely.
and therefore destroy humanity. And I think the real crisis, if we were to talk about existential risk for humanity in this kind of technocratic context, is intimacy, isn't it? Synthetic intimacy, for that reason that so many people feel so isolated, and it's so easy, and they are conditioned to not invest in relationships because online relationships don't need investing in. So
Yeah.
then people go into real life and expect the same, and it doesn't work.
No,
Okay,
it's very different.
they get an AI girlfriend or boyfriend, and that's gonna be like super like exciting new toys marketed and probably even delivered to your door for free by the state on your
Yeah.
UBI
Yeah.
kind of. So as long
Part of
as you
your
don't,
benefits and privileges from the government.
right, as long as you don't procreate, we give you everything you like. Just get
Yeah.
into your pod, enjoy your
New
game.
program each month. If you're not happy,
Yeah, just
just
change
change
your
it.
package. Change your package,
Delete.
swap your girlfriend.
Do.
Yeah. Right. And
Yeah.
it's like yeah, it's like a mix of the Matrix and Idiocracy, isn't it?
Yeah.
It's but then what would be what would you imagine that to lead to? Because I can't see how this can sustain itself for very long, because ultimately this feeds on life, and life will not be able to sustain itself because it will not, again,
Mm.
will not love, will not relate, will not. We know that babies die if they are not attended to, like the
Yeah.
newborns, right? That
Yeah.
not be, they can be provided with nutrients, but if they're not provided with the warmth of an attention of an adult, of a mother or any mother type
Yeah.
figure, then they die. So So that would be like always like a zombie apocalypse, basically, isn't it?
Yeah. Well, I think we've already had the, I mean, I could be wrong about this, but I think we've kind of already had the, what would be the main split. I'm not saying
Main
there isn't.
state of, yeah,
Yeah.
time. Mhm.
And um and so there will be some people that go down that weird path, and um and then some, which is probably more than we think, um will be going down the path of finding this reconnection with their self and with others, and whether it is with family and friends or not, it's just that it's that reconnecting true relationships with people. And like the word intimacy is such a good one, because I mean, I think a lot of people would apply that just purely to romantic relationships, but it's not that. And the it's in the word itself, is into me I see. And that is exactly what a relation, like a real relationship, in any relationship, is there'll be a mirror there of, even if it's a business partnership, the things, the challenges that come up, and how do we communicate and navigate through this in a way that isn't, you know, the destructive or selfish ways that we have been taught and conditioned. And the system has that competitiveness of one
Mm.
needs to be above the other and crush the other, or which is the extreme version. But there is this new emergence coming through of like, how do we actually be and work together and navigate together in all of these different relationships. But intimacy is a very is going to be very key, because that's what it is into me I see, by these reflections of each other. And that's how we emerge and grow, especially through what's going on, because we're not going to be able to do it on our own. You know, some of us
No.
manage to just scrape through being isolated, you know, and shamed and all of these things by being the crazy person. But it was tough going,
Uh,
and
mm.
it toughened us all up. But I don't think it's like toughening us up to then go and do it again, because like could I? Yeah, maybe. Do I want to? Like, no. The first time round, I was driven by this, you know, a bit of
Mm.
shock and anger, actually. And I'm not
Mm.
even sure that's still there. So now it's like, no, we need to actually start. Not that I'm telling anyone what to do, but now for me, is like the part that is not going down this kind of, I don't even know what you want to
Dystopia,
call that, but
dark dystopia, yeah.
yeah, dark dystopia. And it's so bad. This sounds awful. It's so bad. It's darkly comical, because it's what we were talking about, you know, getting a doll and plugging different things. Like, that's actually,
Pleasuring yourself to death with,
yeah, like
like,
that's
oh yeah,
actually
you
what
can
is
live without
planned.
meaning. Amazing. Going back to your first, first thing you said is like, oh, meaning. Who needs meaning? You
Who needs
have this. You
meaning?
have this. We give you this. Living
Yeah.
without meaning. I think that World Economic Forum had one advert like that. How to live without meaning or something. It's great.
Oh, no doubt. I've not heard that one, but no doubt. Yeah, exactly. I know that
So
you'll own nothing and be happy, which is, you know,
classic.
yeah, because you won't even own who you are as a person, right? Which is the whole
Well,
transhumanism thing. It's like,
you won't be
I
able
don't
to
I don't
think.
know whether I'm male or female. So how could I possibly know
Yeah,
who I
you're
am?
totally mind controlled. So the only thing you can be happy because we'll make you think that.
Yeah, because we tell you you are. Oh, okay. Yeah, exactly. Exactly. It's crazy. So yeah, so for me, there's already, and this is just my opinion, that the divide has already happened. Whether there's more people
Right.
that skirt over, I don't know. Hopefully, that would be great. Um, but it's going to, and this is learning as well, because you know
Learning.
these issues have been with us for generations. I mean, like progressively getting worse, obviously. So we've got a lot of, I was going to say digging, but I'm not sure that's the right way. Well, a bit of digging inwards, I guess, to is clear the right word? Maybe integrate and clear some of the conditioning and crap that we have experienced, as well as that's been passed down, because there's a lot of shit there. And then yeah, learning and testing and trying of, you know, how we actually navigate this together in a better way.
Right, and it's exciting, first of all, because you know what
Mm,
I always felt like during the time when things were reasonably stable, let's say pre 2016, look, pre COVID really, but pre that time, years leading up to COVID. And I always thought like the world is such a sad place because everything is sedated to this conformity, and even if it's in non-conformity, even if it's like, I played music and it was supposed to be rebellious, but then I realized that the scene is just another bullshit kind of version of the same thing that
yeah,
I saw in my family. Is like, oh, everything's fucking rotten. Like the system absorbs all opposition. You can't really be genuinely heroic, right?
yeah,
You can't be heroic in a society brainwashed into pleasuring itself to death. You everything is
yeah.
just everything is was
There.
so plastic and so easy and so convenient, and then you're there with like maybe having a bit more money and doing the same things and thinking and not being happy because your ass just gets bigger and you don't really feel like you're evolving anywhere, right? Like
You're just going sideways.
yeah, you just think like it's all futile. And then when COVID
Mm,
happens, like wow, boom, suddenly, wow, you
yes.
don't need big boots to be metal. All you need to do is to account for reality. And
Yeah,
that makes you metal,
exactly.
You
Exactly.
you simply say what is presented in front of you, and that makes you a hero of the day. Like easy job, not a hero or
Absolutely.
villain, but it doesn't matter. The point is that the stakes become so, I mean, simply being honest becomes so radical
Mm,
that if you can't live any other way, that becomes a very precious currency.
yes.
And in the information age, when the most of information is swamped in noise and
Same,
distortion and
same.
whatnot, then if you can communicate with clarity, then it's you cut through the noise immediately. And as we found each other in this way, that we
Yeah,
actually boom, like there's no bullshit. Finally, like there's like
exactly.
it's pure lean kind of agency and clarity there, and it's articulated. And I
Yeah,
think
you know it straight away. Like it felt like it would have been harder to find this before because I know for myself, I wouldn't have been communicating that way. I was just constantly kind of like, what am I missing? What is this? And I like similar to yourself, I know the word that I used, even though my life was busy and all of these different things, I was like, I just feel incredibly bored. Like everything is, there's just nothing. And then it was going back to there's something missing and what's the meaning and it and that is it. But actually, and it's not about it finding exciting things just for it to be exciting, but it was just boring. It was like what like every day, it's just the Groundhog Day thing. And then even if you try something else, it's kind of the same thing. So I know exactly what you mean. And then all of a sudden in the 2020, it was like boom, you're like, oh my God, this is better than an actual movie. I mean, obviously I wasn't thinking
right,
that at the exact time, even though I kind of was like, oh my God, are we in a movie? It was more like, are we in a simulation of some sort? And now it's more like, this is actually this act this was what I was missing. It's like I could feel it. Like it, are we really just here
yeah,
to be having this kind of weird Groundhog Day thing and everyone's
right.
okay with it?
Surely,
Like, are you really
surely there's
okay with
more to
this?
it.
Like, what's wrong with you? I'm like, something's missing. And then boom, 2020 hit. Once I looked into things, it's
Oh,
like, yeah, this is what I could feel. And wow, this is wild. And so yeah, it's a roller coaster ride. And the main thing, and I don't know whether this is everyone's belief or sense, but is, we've come here for this time.
in a
And we
way,
all have
yeah,
our unique ways of being in it and dealing with it and navigating it. And that's going to be the key piece is expressing that in some way so that we can start to piece ourselves together like this big jigsaw puzzle that we are. And that's how we start shifting. Um, I don't know whether you want to say timelines or shifting things or the
the balance
vibration or whatever it may be.
shifting that we can even call it in economic terms is probably common for people to think in economic terms, shifting the currency of
Yeah.
what is valuable and what is not. Because right now, still most of things
Yep.
are attached to what is actually killing all of us.
Yes.
And the trick is that to wiggle bit by bit, to wiggle out of that, to build the currency of doing the opposite, like some of us kind of do, like you say, at the moment the price of that is to be, you can do it, but then you can't have all the things that we really need also, which is the community and being rooted and being belonging somewhere that is, like you relate, you can genuinely relate to, right, on the physical, in physical proximity.
Yeah.
Yeah. But I think, yes, and building these new ways of being, and ultimately new institutions and new structures and new education systems, economic systems, and all other systems, which ultimately is, as idealistic as it sounds, it is necessary.
It is necessary.
Insofar as we are to survive.
Yeah.
Basically. So, but it's such an enormous job that for most of people, it's just like, oh, fucking leave me alone.
Really?
I
You
have to
mean
pay
rebuild everything?
everything from scratch.
Mm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So it's bizarre, but at the same time, people say, oh, but that's not within, maybe, but that's not within our lifetime. But I'm just reading the book, and how I said about these revolutions in history, because of the, technology has this exponential curve. So it's not that it's kind of, it always takes the same time. It always, first it took like thousands of years, then it hundreds of years, and now then decades, and now it's gonna take, then it's gonna, arguably within our lifetimes there will be this complete headfuck of a transformation somehow. Whatever it will be, we can't predict it from the current state, but it's clearly underway. And
Okay, definitely on the way. And I think it I would imagine it was kind of on the way anyway, and now we have this pressure cooker, right, of forces working against um us, or and it, I guess, and that's just going to add to the speed, because the more we discover about plans on the other side, it's like, okay, we're going to have to, as best we can, start to navigate around, somehow navigate through, or rebuild, or rethink, or re-see. All of these things, they're already happening. And I guess we're just kind of in that very, very, very beginning phase of starting to regroup after the whole shock and awe of what just happened. And like, and it's that realization of like, yeah, if we have to rebuild.
yeah,